You can listen to The Professional Left wherever you get your podcasts, on Netroots Radio, or at our website, proleftpod.com, where you can also contribute to this podcast. There is a PayPal button at our website, or you can mail us a letter and or contribution at P.O. Box 9133, Springfield, Illinois, 62791. And this is the podcast for July 16th, 2024. And you know what? It's not safe for work.
Recorded live from the Cornfield Resistance, where it's my birthday today. It's The Professional Left with Driftglass and Blue Gal.
Happy birthday, darling.
Thank you. Me, my mom, my late mom, the late, great Barbara Stanwyck.
Your grandmother is like...
who drink with the boys and have hearts of gold, right?
Is your grandmother like close to this date?
She's yesterday.
Yeah, it's weird.
In 1902.
It's a weird thing. There's a whole science fiction theme.
July 15th.
There's a whole science fiction theme we should do on that, which is
women born within 3 days of each other, right?
Well, just in the same family. Like, is it some sort of time travel, alternate dimension kind of thing? I don't know.
Yeah, it is. It's something. It's November is what it is. It gets cold.
That's true. That's true. As an October birth, I know what happens in February. So,
yeah, it's Valentine's Day, baby. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. But
we are recording this on Tuesday, Blue Gal's birthday, which is when we usually do our No Fair Remembering Stuff podcast. We know that, which we really do enjoy doing. And since there's so much that needs remembering and so many people trying so hard to erase it,
I will say that the kind of universal kind of reaction that I'm getting, whether it's civilians or, professionals, is really a deep concern and lack of confidence in not us at this table or us at MSNBC, but us as the media writ large. And a fear that what's going to happen now is that the Republican Party will do what they do. They're in the middle of a campaign. The convention started today. But the media will acquiesce to trying to convince people that the things they've been experiencing for the last, 5-6 years didn't happen. That the greatest purveyor and promoter of political violence, really, since anyone can remember, since George Wallace, I think, that we just haven't experienced that kind of open, sort of citing or sort of incitement of violence or sort of luxuriating in the idea of violence. It's just not something we're used to anymore in American politics. And then we had to get used to that being a thing. And people are concerned and expressing concern that we won't be the guardians of memory and that we will allow Donald Trump, as he is, bathed in the glory and grandeur of his party, to rewrite himself as both a hero and a victim, that people who are the most vulnerable to not just the things he's done, but the things he's promising to do, and that will then happen without a guardian saying, wait, stop. And then the media will acquiesce to this rewrite. And the people that I've been talking to don't accept the rewrite. They still remember that this person said, get him out, I'll pay your legal fees. They still remember that Republicans like Marjorie Taylor Greene did ads where they had long guns and were firing at pictures of Nancy Pelosi and have been promoting the idea that the Democrats, the left, the liberals, it'll be peaceful, said the Heritage Foundation leader, if the left allows it. People haven't forgotten those threats. And they don't want us to forget them either.
And at the same time, Donald Trump, for all the using the idea of victimization as a political trope, he is legitimately the victim.
Now, FYI, we got that audio from a third-party website because, sorry, Joy, we're not watching MSNBC this summer. Nope. And we're going to do some promiscuous remembering today because that's what we do, since the greatest enemies of fascism are facts and context, which is why George Orwell warned, who controls the past controls the future, and who controls the present controls the past. This is a fight over who controls the present. And at the moment, who will win that fight is very much in doubt, which is why people are so on edge and so angry.
And we're on edge and angry, too, despite the birthday. I think it's okay to say that.
Yeah.
I actually just got back from a trip this weekend. I quite in a very necessary way, went to Western Pennsylvania to see my dad. My dad is 88 years old. He just got out of ICU a week and a half ago.
Yeah.
He has bladder cancer. And while he was in the hospital being treated for bladder cancer and was going to be home the next day, they found out his oxygen levels were just tanking. And he's a lifelong smoker, and this was really bad. And he was in ICU for, oh my God,
almost
2.5 weeks?
Yeah. Yeah, 3 weeks.
It was funny because when he got home from the hospital, he said, "Oh, look at this great thing you got me." I said, "Dad, that was your Father's Day gift."
Oh.
And that's how long you've been in the hospital. And it's like, I sent that to you. I sent him a poster of the RMS Aquitania, which is the boat he came over on as a child. So, there's a lot going on, but he loved the poster. And I said, "Yeah, Dad, that was for Father's Day." And now it's mid-July. So,
and just FYI, I did not get a poster of the Aquitania, nor did I get a poster of the Rocky Mountains, which is near where I was born.
Well, it's not. Well, no. What did we have Stepdad's Day for you anyway?
Yes, we do.
That's in May. So, in any event, so I went because I've been planning this trip for a while, but he's been in the hospital. It was really important that I go and give him a hug. I was just gone for a full day. Flew in Friday, flew back Sunday to Pittsburgh, and my dad has just gotten his car keys back. He's very proud, and he really wanted to pick me up at my hotel. So Saturday morning, he picks me up at my hotel.
Well, and my joke was, you demanded that he pick you up at the hotel.
I demanded he get out of his oxygen tent and pick me up. Right.
Curb to curb service, old man.
No, well, I'll tell you, he's got this little portable oxygen tank. I mean, all of the technology has just improved dramatically. Yep. He has a big compressor at home that provides him with oxygen, and a portable, and so forth and so on. And they're delivering everything. This is all Obamacare, by the way.
Yep.
All of his medical supplies are being delivered to his home in such a timely manner. And both of my sisters came down to see me, but one of them said, "My God, we just ordered that yesterday, and this morning it's here." And I said, "You don't understand. If Dad goes back in the hospital, there's a whole bunch of metrics that decline rapidly for the hospital, for the caretakers, for the company that's involved with delivery. And they're being graded by Medicare for how they take care of Dad."
They sure are. Yep.
That's because of Barack Obama. Thanks, Obama.
Yep.
So anyway, he picked me up at my hotel. We're going to go to breakfast. And I want to say, by the way, shout out to Wise County Biscuits. They do a great hippie breakfast. They have fantastic coffee. And we went there because Max's Allegheny Tavern isn't open for breakfast. And that's his bar and tavern. And actually, that restaurant was mobbed by a music festival all weekend. We weren't able to go to Max's. That was a big deal on the north side in Pittsburgh. Just want to shout out to both of those.
Even I have been to Max's.
You've been to Max because Max's is potato pancake Reubens is what you go have at Max's. When you're in Pittsburgh, that's what you do.
And a beer. And
by the way, we don't know about the Steelers yet. It's an open question. Okay. Mm-hmm. Big deal. You ask about the Steelers, and it's an open question right now.
Right.
And everybody's very on edge about that, too. So he picks me up at my hotel, and one of the first things we start talking about after hugs and kisses is, how's Biden doing?
Yeah.
And I had just listened to, that morning, the speech in Detroit. I said, I think he's doing great. And my dad just yelled at me. No, honey, he's not. It's terrible. Things are falling apart in the Democratic Party because he won't drop out.
Right.
And I'm just appalled that he's saying this. Now, let me be clear. Dad is a lifelong Democrat from Chicago. He's not going to vote any way but straight Democratic ticket. I know that. He knows that. That's not the question. He's going to vote for Biden, but he's very nervous and on edge. And as we're driving to the restaurant, we agree to stop talking about it for a minute. He turns on NPR, and he needs hearing aids, and sometimes he doesn't like to wear them. So he's got NPR up all the way and driving to the restaurant. And he's trying to have a conversation with me.
Wait a minute. Where did you ever become political with a dad who talks about politics in the New York Times? And
New York Times and the whole thing. I'm so proud of him. Anyway, but as we're driving and we've agreed to a timeout on this topic, I realize my dad reads the New York Times every day. And, I can vociferously disagree with him on this, but he has been taking in the slow drip of poison from the Peter Baker set, hired by the Sulzberger family to destroy Democrats for decades, since Clinton, at least, since Bill Clinton, at least.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly, as we talked about last week, in the last few weeks. And so we go to breakfast, and there are some friends of my dad's who have been really helpful while he's been in the hospital, who came to breakfast to meet me. And so we're all at breakfast, these friends and my dad and I, and the topic of Biden comes up again. Mm-hmm. And this is when I decide to bring up on my phone our podcast notes from last week.
Excuse me while I whip this out.
And so I said, this is from my podcast to these total strangers. And I said, this is also from the website, The Conversation. This is what I read to them. And you'll remember this from last week if you listen to us regularly. But they'd never heard of this. Quote, journalist Jennifer Schultz observed that as of the morning of July 5th, the New York Times had published nearly 200 pieces on Biden's debate performance, comprising 142 news articles and 50 opinion pieces in 8 days. That's 8 days from the debate to July 5th, 50 op-eds about Biden's debate performance. In comparison, the historian Heather Cox Richardson wrote that Trump was covered in only 92 stories total during that same period. Mm-hmm. So over half the number of total Trump articles are just op-eds about Biden. Quote, although Trump has frequently slurred his words or trailed off while speaking and repeatedly fell asleep at his own criminal trial, Richardson pointed out, none of the pieces mentioned Trump's mental fitness, unquote. Yeah. And the entire table, including my dad, were stunned. But it reaffirmed for me that the New York Times has been dining out on educated people in flyover country, like my dad, who still believe that the New York Times is the paper of record. They still believe in the old gray lady. Mm-hmm. And more importantly than that, their identity as educated, well-informed people is tied up in reading the New York Times. And that's really hard to break. Mm-hmm. And in fact, one of the people at breakfast, not my dad, but one of the people at breakfast apologized and said, I'm sorry, I can't cancel my New York Times subscription.
Oh.
I love the book review too much. I love the recipes. That's how they get you, right? Yeah. No, I mean, I'm not expecting them to do that.
No.
But at the same time, I don't know if there's any way back for us politically without putting those institutions out of business.
I would like to observe, just as an aside, that my wife conducted a focus group in a Pittsburgh diner.
I did.
So in this Pittsburgh diner, my wife...
literally, yes. Literally.
Not just said, who are you voting for? What do you think? It was, are you aware that this is how the story has been reported in the New York Times relative to the person who's involved and the topic of importance? Mm-hmm. Not just, what's your opinion? And I'm just going to take your opinion and walk away with it without giving you any further information, just because as ill-informed as you are, not these people, or as dumb as you are, as a lot of people are, I'm not going to try to change your mind. I'm just taking a snapshot of your opinion. This is what my wife's focus group did.
Yeah.
She said, now I know what you all believe, and that's fine. Were you aware that ...
That there's a complete imbalance in what's going on? Because none of these people like Trump, and none of them are going to vote for Trump.
Right.
But they're terrified that Biden is incapable of winning because the New York Times has told them that 50 times in 50 op-eds.
And wouldn't it be nice?
8 fucking days.
And wouldn't it be nice if journalists did journalism?
Yeah. Well, journalist Jennifer Schultz did. She went and counted the number of op-eds.
Yep.
That's been plain sight.
Uh-huh.
But when it's dripping in every day, and once you've read the paper, you put it in a box for recycling, and you're not tallying what is being dripped into your mental, opinion brain
every day. 3 times a day. Yeah.
You and I, Drift Glass, we can smell a Peter Baker article from across the street.
Oh, you might recall that I used to predict what David Brooks was going to write.
Absolutely. And you were within, the width of a keyboard. You were accurate.
Yeah, over and over again. Here's the issue. Here's what the temperature of the country is. Here's what David Brooks will say.
Here's how many column lines the razor will be there.
It'll be in the 7th paragraph. It'll be on the other hand, and then it'll be a bunch of bullshit he made up.
Yep.
And so it is that, but to your point, some people who consider themselves informed and educated and otherwise require that ritual.
Absolutely.
They're used to that rhythm, that cadence of reassurance.
I'm not going to take away the New York Times from my 88-year-old dad.
No.
But I don't know if it wasn't his daughter telling him this.
Right.
What would have happened? I don't know. But his daughter, he respects. And he always respected my mom, whose birthday it is today, too. Yeah. I grew up in a house where women's opinions were respected. And that is a legacy. That and having parents that are artists are the 2 legacies that I have. They're not going to leave me money. They're not going to leave me houses and cars and so forth. They're leaving me women are respected. Art is a thing. And I wouldn't trade that for anything. But
no, and I have to suffer with all that because every now and then my wife will come in like every couple of hours and say, "Did you read this article in the New Yorker?" Here,
yes, I do.
Check it out. Yes, you do. And I go,
yes, I do.
Okay.
And the New Yorker is just as bad. I mean, I tweeted while I was gone. Peter Baker tweeting his wife's article on Biden still not out of the woods without mentioning it's his wife's article.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think I told you, and this is a complete aside, I don't mean to do this, but
go ahead.
I used to have a little dog named Mahal.
Yeah.
And we would take Mahal out to the big field by our house and walk Mahal and et cetera. And on snowy days, occasionally we would make a snowball and throw it into a snowdrift, and Mahal would like burrow through to the next suburb looking for the ball. But Mahal was used to being walked like counterclockwise.
Mm-hmm.
Every day, go out, big, wide, sweeping circle, walk. And every now and then I would try to walk her counterclockwise or clockwise. And she'd be completely confused because I'd be stepping in front of her. It's like, no, we go this way. This is the way we go. And she couldn't understand what was happening, except there was a basic rhythm to our behavior that had changed.
Mm-hmm.
And it was very upsetting. So I'd stop it. And there was a certain rhythm, a cadence to both sides are to blame.
Yeah.
That's very reassuring because it tells people you're not the crazy one. It's really not you, good New York Times reader. It's a bunch of crazy people on both sides.
That also feeds into the reasonable intellectual myth.
Right.
That's right. I read the paper and I listen to NPR and I do PBS, and therefore I am a civilized person. And being civilized means you listen to all sides. You argue in good faith, and you make reasonable judgments based on compromise and reason.
Exactly. And
that's not what we're dealing with in either the Republican Party or the mainstream media at this point.
And once you hear the rhythm, once you hear the structure of the story, and you and I are both right, once you hear the structure of the plot, you can predict, okay, story beat, twist, Obama can't lead. Right. Story beat, but Biden is old. And it's and you can find it that way because it's always the same.
Yep. And that makes it easier for them to write it too.
Sure does. Anyway.
Okay, so we had that breakfast. And then that very night, less than 42 miles from where I was staying in Pittsburgh and less than 85 miles from where I went to high school north of Pittsburgh, a young white man with a Republican dad tried to shoot Trump. And it turns out their family was in the data set of Cambridge Analytica, listed among those in 2016 who were likely to be influenced by propaganda about guns. Now, Cambridge Analytica did not need computers to figure that out. They could have asked me.
Yeah, you told me.
When I went to high school in Western Pennsylvania, a public school, we got the first day of doe season and the first day of buck season, which are 2 separate days, off as school holidays. The whole day was a school holiday because of deer hunting. Kids in my class routinely got hunting gear for Christmas and birthdays. And debates in high school civics class in junior and senior year revealed that the majority of boys in my graduating class of 119 students, that's how rural my school was, would never, ever vote for a Democrat because Ted Kennedy wants to take away my guns.
And they all knew it. That's
shut down any discussion of any other subject.
Gun-grabbing Dems.
Right.
Yep.
And Pennsylvania, by the way, is literally number one with a bullet. They have 14.1 deer hunters per square mile in the state of Pennsylvania. But this phenomenon is not just Western Pennsylvania. It's Wisconsin, Michigan, Colorado. And it does not matter that Joe Biden out loud recommends a shotgun for home protection if you want to have a firearm in your home.
Yeah.
You need to protect your home from a bear or from an invader or from a bad guy, get a shotgun. He says
very effective. Shotgun, very effective.
He says it out loud.
Yeah.
The brainwashing of Democrats as gun stealers goes back over 50 years.
Yep.
So, Driftglass, you and I have a battle on two fronts against 50 years or more of right-wing propaganda and the slow drip of New York Times perfidy. And at the moment, I'm so frustrated because it seems impossible to overcome either one of those things.
It does.
You and I, Driftglass, are so blessed. We have thousands of listeners every week. Not millions, but thousands. And I am so grateful for every single one of you out there. It's a miracle to me that the two of us with 2 used laptops and donated microphones, donated by a listener, have built such a passionate community that we hear from all the time and who listen to us every week. And the thing is, we listen back. You give us ideas. You share with us what's going on in your lives. And so I want to share a couple of short letters with you. This one is postmarked from Des Moines, Iowa. Greetings. Hello. I'm the dad writing this letter. I turned 80 this past March. My oldest son turned 50 in April. He introduced me to your podcast during these past 20 months as we have had many changes in our lives as we age. My son is our full-time caregiver and is very necessary in my wife's, she's 76, and my life. My wife is a diabetic since 1993, and she requires much assistance and service. The state of Iowa finally acknowledged his status and began paying him about 2 months ago. He has actually been staying with us since November of 2017.
Damn. Yep.
Bless your son.
Absolutely.
And bless you. And I want to do a side note here about policy. What I believe they're talking about with the son getting paid are Medicaid waivers for home and community-based services. That's called HCBS. That's not an entitlement like Medicare. The number of participant slots to get paid as a family caregiver is limited, and once the enrollment cap for your state has been reached, there's a wait list. And there are wait lists in Iowa and other states to pay family members for at-home care, even though the state of Iowa acknowledges the obvious fact that the purpose of the waivers is to delay or prevent nursing home care, which is much more expensive to Medicare. And as I said, my dad was having medical supplies delivered to the house in lightning quick speed because they don't want him going back to the hospital and they don't want him at a care facility. The Biden White House released a fact sheet this past April, that's just 3 months ago, pushing for more funding for home health care. Biden's plan, quote, would invest in expanding Medicaid home and community-based services to help a larger number of older adults and people with disabilities receive care in their home or community, and promote better opportunities for home health care workers and family caregivers. The president's investments will help ensure that they can receive care in their own homes and communities. The president has also proposed substantial investments for family caregivers serving our nation's heroes, including stipends and support services for family caregivers of eligible veterans, unquote. Now, you may not remember this, but let's do a little no fair remembering stuff. You may remember that investing in home health care workers was a significant plank of the Build Back Better Care Economy bill. And that bill was stabbed in the back by Manchin and Sinema. Not that a single Republican would vote for it.
No, absolutely not.
But the reason it didn't pass was Joe Manchin.
Well, now, wait a minute. To misquote Fred Savage from The Princess Bride, is this a kissing book? I mean, is this a policy discussion? We're talking about policy
discussion.
Lou Gal, nobody cares about policy. Policy's silly. I know that because I read the New York Times, and nobody cares about policy. Policy's boring.
I'll tell you know who cares about policy? Iowa dad and his son.
All right, fine. 2 people in the whole country actually
and
care.
Lots of other people. And if you're a state budget director, you ought to care about this.
Yeah.
Because
you know who should care? Yeah.
Everybody who cares about, and we've learned over and over again, Republicans don't give a shit about the deficit. I could go on and on. But look, what the White House was able to accomplish, because let's face it, the White House has a lot of Lizzie Warren acolytes working there.
They do.
And when they hit up against Joe Manchin, what do? They go back and figure out what they can get done, because that's how Elizabeth Warren operates. And I'm giving her full credit for that. And Jayapal as well. Pramila Jayapal also. All right, fine. Let's see what we can get done. This is also Hillary Clinton. Women are doing this, all right? So what the White House was able to accomplish was they did a skinny Build Back Better bill, which is also known, and it's always touted as the Inflation Reduction Act. I think the reason the White House touts it as Inflation Reduction Act instead of the Build Back Better bill is they want to bring back the Build Back Better bill next term. If they can get a majority in the Senate and they can get, knock wood, get the trifecta, they want to bring back Build Back Better with that care economy stuff in it. But the Inflation Reduction Act, what they got done was a cap on the price of insulin now and more drugs later. Huge. I cannot tell you how huge it is that all of a sudden Medicare is going to be able to negotiate drug prices.
Again, policy stuff. This doesn't affect people in the real world.
It doesn't affect diabetics like, the wife of Iowa dad. Yes, it does.
Mm-hmm.
And insulin was the wedge that opened the door to lower prescription costs for other things, because insulin is so critical to people's lives and so cheap to make and such an outrage to everyone who had a brain and didn't have a stake in keeping it high. It was just obscene that this was happening. Also, and this is happening now because of the Inflation Reduction Act, starting next year, 2025, all individuals with Medicare Part D will have their out-of-pocket prescription drug costs capped at $2,000. And people, Driftglass and I know people who are paying $11,000 a year for drugs.
Yep, absolutely. Out of pocket.
Yep. Thank God their house is paid for, because they're paying a mortgage plus every month to keep the drugs coming, their prescriptions. And they're on Medicare. This is what we're sitting here counting the days on the calendar until one of us is on Medicare. I'm 61 today. 4 more years. 4 more years.
4 more years. 4 more years.
Medicare for us.
Yeah. And then we don't care about any of this stuff. then you can all burn in hell as far as we're concerned.
We got ours. Screw you. No.
It
makes a difference in people's lives.
It does. It makes their lives better and they healthier and happier, and improves the conditions of communities and families everywhere.
Yep. So look, Biden didn't get everything he wanted. He wanted to expand paying family members for home health care for seniors, because that saves Medicare a ton of money, just like negotiating drug prices saves Medicare a ton of money. Meanwhile, Rand Paul just wants to increase the retirement age and cut things and privatize Medicare. So there's your choice, folks.
Got to pay for those tax cuts somehow, Blue Gal.
But so it's still a Democratic and a Biden priority that is attainable, unless Trump and the Republicans get elected. And it makes me want to throw up to even think about it.
Yep.
By the way, no Republican voted for any of this help for senior citizens. Not one. Not one Republican voted for the Inflation Reduction Act. Not one. And the Senate passed the Inflation Reduction Act through reconciliation, and Kamala Harris broke the tie. So
another woman.
Having someone in the White House, black woman, broke the tie and got $35 insulin for seniors.
Now you realize we're breaking all the rules because according to all the pundits, Blue Gal, you don't win by talking about your accomplishments and what you've done to help people and what policy changes you've made and how hard it was to get it past the obstructionist fascists who want to destroy everything. That's just stuff nobody wants to hear about. So,
well, let's go back to Iowa Dad's letter. He continues, quote, "The level of stupid in our country is really just so disgusting."
And that's not covered under Medicaid either. Stupid is not a covered.
Anyhow, this is again the letter. "Thanks to both of you for your podcasts and work for honesty in this life.
Mm-hmm.
Please accept our donation and use as needed." And now I'm crying.
Yeah.
There is no return address on their envelope, or I would have returned the money.
Yeah.
Thank you.
They need it more than we do, honestly.
Yeah. But this is what the New York Times is not covering, and what it is destroying with its obsession with Biden's age, to give Trump a fighting chance in November, so there's a horse race, or so that the suits upstairs get their tax cuts, or whatever the reason is destroying the progress that we're making to make life just a little bit easier for vulnerable populations.
Mm-hmm.
So Sunday morning, I come over to my dad's house, and he stood out on his porch and watched me parallel park, which is like a nightmare. It's like those nightmares where you're going back to school and there's a test you didn't know about. I have a driver's test I don't know about, and my dad's standing there giving me a grade. Okay. But I come in and have coffee and so forth, and my dad says, "Hey, Fran, I guess the New York Times got your message." And he holds up the entire full-page section of the New York Times about Trump being unfit to serve. A whole section of no fair remembering what all the things Trump did during his administration that make him unfit to serve.
Sure.
And I had to tell him how too little too late all of that is.
Mm-hmm.
There is such relentless, fake balance. And not only that, it's Manhattan privilege nonsense coming out of the House of Sulzberger that I'm just not sure not only they, but our country can come back from it.
No.
The other letter we got is much shorter, and it has no policy prescriptions attached to it, so I'll be very brief. It comes from a woman in Maryland. "Dear Driftglass and Blue Gal, my husband listened to you regularly and often spoke to me about your podcasts. I appreciate the many hours of pleasure you gave him. He passed away June 5th, and before he died, he asked me to send this check to you to express his thanks. You're the only ones he told me to donate to." We have had other people actually this year donate. A gentleman whose father passed away and asked us to accept a donation in memory of his father. And I am very cautious about revealing, any personal information about someone who's passed. When people pass away and money is distributed, I know firsthand that can be a very complicated thing.
Yes.
And giving money to a liberal podcast, even though that's directly the wishes of the person who passed away, that can create rifts in families. So oftentimes what I will do is thank them on email and not mention it. This letter was anonymous enough. I felt I could share it. I am so sorry for your loss. And thank you so much for letting us know that your husband, may his memory be a blessing, that he got something out of the show.
We're very glad
Deeply
we could
appreciate knowing that. That makes a difference to us and all the work we do.
Yeah, it really does. I mean, if we can be a relief or a balm or a context or some vocabulary or just...
Or in the case of my dad, a fork in his ass.
Well, yeah. Or you're not alone. You're not alone. And there are people out there who think as you do, and we're not crazy, and we're not unreasonable. We're not nuts. We're just Midwestern folks who think that the country could be in much better shape if they just stopped doing some of the things they're doing at the top of the media. And frankly,
and so then Sunday morning after that, we got on Zoom with you.
Yep.
And Dad did the New York Times crossword puzzle in 37 minutes with you.
And I'm begging him to slow down. I'm begging him.
Really.
Dude,
this time he was really on.
Yeah.
And his first name was an answer in the puzzle.
Yeah.
By the way, I said, "Dad, they know you're back."
Yeah.
that's the first puzzle I think he's done since he got out of the hospital.
I think, yeah, because we tried once and he was very tired, and I understand
he was unable, to really do it. But this was great. Just so glad, so glad.
Wonderful. That's a ritual,
and not bad for 88.
No, and that is a ritual that technology gives us, which is we can get on Zoom with your dad on Tuesdays and Thursdays in the morning.
Sundays and Thursdays,
Sundays and Thursdays, right? And do the cross seat. My cognitive abilities are.
That's failing. It. You don't know what day it is, Driftglass. It's your wife's birthday.
Take my keys away now.
Talk about the gorilla test.
Okay. No, that's the worst transition we've ever done. So,
there is no transition to talking about the gorilla experiment. But
no, but it's something
that's our next topic.
I need E.G. Marshall in here to do an ad from. I'm listening to
X-Lax.
I'm listening to CBS Mystery Theater from the 70s and 80s, which I had listened to when I was a kid, out like fishing with my dad and his wife. And one night we got locked out of the car or lost the keys. I remember having to crawl through the trunk to get them, but the car was on. So we listened to like CBS Mystery Theater at night. And I love that show. And it's E.G. Marshall, and it's the interstitial commercials for Anison and Bayer and X-Lax and stuff so I need him here to transition from a very heartfelt letter from a wonderful listener on behalf of her past husband, to a gorilla experiment that I wrote about this week.
Yeah.
Which is, I wrote about insincerity, and I still believe it. And it's based on The Invisible Gorilla, which is a book published in 2010, co-authored by Christopher Chabris and Daniel Simons. This title of this book refers to an earlier research project by Chabris and Simons called The Invisible Gorilla Test, revealing that people who are focused on one thing can easily overlook something else. To demonstrate this effect, they created a video where students passed a basketball between themselves. Viewers were asked to count the number of times the players with the white shirts passed the ball, and often failed to notice that a person in a gorilla suit, who appears in the center of the image, walking straight through the thing, they never noticed it as an experiment described as one of the most famous psychological demonstrations ever. And
you warned me about it, so I noticed the gorilla.
Yeah.
But I also was really focused on counting the white shirts and the basketball.
Yeah.
And I can see how someone might miss the gorilla suit if all you're looking at is white and basketball, and counting. Right. Your brain is completely engaged in that activity.
Right. And what we have taught, not we, you and I'm getting really more picky about the use of we and people and stuff and voters, so I try to avoid it myself, and I often fail. But what the media, broadly speaking, has been conditioned to do is tell a both sides story. Yeah. Whether you're in J school or graduating or an intern, or you want to rise in the organization, you want to become next Peter Baker, you damn well better be doing what the institution wants you to do. And the institution, the very walls of the institution cry out, it has to be both sides. It has to be a horse race. And in the case of a lot of them, even if you have to make shit up to balance the scale, do it. Even if you have to infer that maybe some liberal somewhere might do such a thing to balance it out, that has to be the story every fucking time, because that's the only story we tell. And once you've done that, once you've conditioned an entire workforce to only focus on that, the gorilla walking through the middle of all that will go completely unnoticed. Like the fact that Donald Trump is an actual fascist, like the fact that he has promoted violence, that he has encouraged his followers to be violent, that he's a liar, that he's a grifter, that he's a traitor. All those things kind of go, but that's sort of the background. That's the wall against which the players are passing the ball. They don't notice it at all because they've trained themselves not to. Because honestly, once you start to notice the gorilla and want to tell the gorilla story, you don't have a career in the media anymore.
Yeah, you won't be able to count the number of times the basketball is passed to white shirts.
Right.
And that's what your bosses have told you need to report on.
And that's where you get into motivated reasoning.
Yeah.
You might think there's a gorilla there, but you really don't want to look to see too closely, because that would distract you from telling the both sides do it story that is the fetish of the media.
Exactly.
Now, if I were a president with unlimited power granted to me by the Supreme Court, would I order a SEAL team to take out Donald Trump? Of course not. That's crazy. Of course I wouldn't do that, for a lot of reasons, one of which is practical, because Donald Trump is not the problem. Donald Trump is the outflow pipe which the entire Republican Party is currently using to pump rage, and racism and paranoia into the world. The problem is the party, not the delivery system, which happens to be Donald Trump. And it doesn't matter if Trump drops dead on the golf course tomorrow in front of a dozen witnesses. However, he finally sheds this mortal coil. Within minutes, the right will declare it to have been a deep state assassination plot, hatched by Democrats and funded by George Soros.
Yep.
The symptom would be gone, dead and buried on some golf course somewhere, but the disease would go merrily on. Which is why, and this is no pun intended, all the magic bullshit scenario would actually be more like it. But the magic bullet scenarios tossed out by enthusiastic Pollyannas and fed up pessimists are just frankly exhausting because there will be no expansion of the Supreme Court anytime in the near future. There will be no statehood for Washington, D.C. or Puerto Rico or Guam or the moon or whatever. That's not going to happen. Quit wasting your time wishing for it because it's not going to come and save us. There will be no constitutional amendment getting rid of the Electoral College, much as there should be. That'd be a great thing, but it's not going to happen. And no president in your lifetime will ever be impeached and removed from office. So please, please get over it.
Well,
all right?
Drift Glass, two things.
Yes.
People said the same thing about Medicare negotiating drug prices.
Sure.
So I would offer that as a caveat. That said, I am already worried about the 2030 census.
Right there with you, baby.
If we win this election, we got the White House till 2028, and then people will think it's time for a change. Maybe we need a difference. I think we need change to something different. And then the Republican Party is in charge of administering the census.
Mm-hmm.
And I know you said to me during our rehearsal, well, a lot of those people will be dead by that time. I said, no, they won't. They'll be still counted if they voted the right way.
Mm-hmm. Well, may I make a counter argument?
Mm-hmm.
By 2030, both you and I will be on Social Security and Medicare, and we won't care about
anything. And we could say, screw you, we got ours.
Screw you, we got ours. Fuck you all. Ha, ha, ha.
We'll still be podcasting about how important it is to vote for Democrats.
Until they take me out of here, toes up.
Foot first. Yep.
Now, some of these savvier pundits do realize that none of this is going to happen. And they'll go on to tell you, no, the real cure, the only real cure is to beat the Republicans so badly in the next several elections that that'll finally learn them. You just got to beat them until they're on their knees and they stop doing what they're doing. But overwhelming electoral victory one after another is the only practical solution to the problem.
I've fantasized about that.
Yeah.
They'll go back to country music and NFL.
Sure,
and we can enjoy NFL with them and yell for our teams together.
Happy to do it.
Yeah.
Happy to do it. But that's not going to happen. That's just not going to happen. The system is not built to give anybody a landslide anymore. And I know you're already worried about the 2030 census, but I don't know if you've noticed the mopes who were supposed to be chastened in this scenario by repeated defeats, those Republicans who were supposed to learn their lesson once and for all, simply no longer believe they were ever defeated in the first place.
Yeah.
They didn't lose. Everything's rigged. And anyone who tells them otherwise is fake news.
Yep.
They're Republicans. They don't fucking learn anything. They just get angrier and more belligerent, and they're going to go right on being this way until the day they die. Now, this is from your Twitter and social media husband, Elie Mystal.
Yep, my TV husband. Yep.
On Twitter, quote, in other news, Biden called the widow, this is the widow of the gentleman who was killed at the Trump rally. He called her widow to offer her his condolences, but she wouldn't talk to him. She wouldn't talk to the president of the United States because her husband wouldn't have wanted her to speak to him. On the other hand, she said that Trump still hasn't called. And then she said she's still voting for Trump because it's a cult, unquote. There will be no definitive victory over the fascists as there was in World War II. Instead, this is going to go on and on, probably for the rest of our lives. Because the people who want to tear this country apart and establish a business-friendly dictatorship are way too well-financed, and their shock troops are way too brainwashed to ever change. That's what we're stuck with for the next couple of decades. In the early 1800s, Napoleon found that no matter what he tried, he couldn't win an outright victory in Spain. Where are you going with this, Driftglass? The Spanish armies were repeatedly beaten and driven away, and then they went into hiding, or they went to the periphery of the battlefield or the periphery of the country, but they would always regroup and relentlessly hound and demoralize the French troops. This drain on French resources led Napoleon to call the conflict the Spanish ulcer. And this is what it's going to be like, an ulcer. To borrow a term from the author Jeff Charlotte, this is an ongoing slow civil war. And the problem is the Republicans have been waging this war on us for decades. They started dropping the proverbial shells at Fort Sumter 40 years ago. And Democrats continue to delude themselves that this could all be resolved by strictly adhering to the tenets of the Beltway's most powerful cult, the cult of both sides do it. Just keep compromising, keep extending the hand of friendship, and surely one day all that good faith will be reciprocated. But it wasn't, because they weren't negotiating with good faith opponents. They were capitulating to fascists, which only made the fascists hungrier.
What about the grain, Bones?
Oh, yes, it was poison.
Poisoned?
Yes, it's been impregnated with a virus. The virus turns into an inert material in the bloodstream. And the more the organism eats, the more inert matter is built up. So after 2 or 3 days, it would reach a point where they couldn't take in enough nourishment to survive.
They starved to death in a storage compartment full of grain. They starved to death.
That is essentially it.
Like poisoned tribbles, the more the right was fed on concession after concession after concession, the hungrier they got and the more they demanded. So getting back to Orwell and controlling the past and controlling the present, there's some wild shit going on which seems contradictory, but it's actually not. On the one hand, you have practically the entire corporate media demanding that the rest of us shut the hell up about the very real and dangerous threat posed to our country by Donald Trump and the Republican Party, that everyone needs to cool it. On the right, however, you have a near universal chorus screaming that lefties telling the obvious truth about the Republican Party is what drove an obscure Republican head case and gun nut to take a shot at the world's most famous Republican head case and gun nut. This is Eric Erickson. Quote, "Yeah, it turns out the fascists are actually the Democrats who've been trying to get their major opponent taken off the ballot through unconstitutional means and shot," unquote. And this is Congressman Mike Collins from the Georgia 10th. Quote, "Joe Biden sent the orders," unquote. That's an elected congressman from Georgia. And this was Mike Collins' ad when he first ran for Congress.
Hey, Mike Collins here, your pro-Trump America First trucker, running for Congress here in Georgia 10. Well, I understand Joe Biden was in town yesterday to talk about our elections. It seems that he and Kamala Harris called anyone who disagreed with the federal hijacking of this election a racist. Well, Joe, I got some news for you. Let me tell you what Georgians really believe. First of all, you count the legal votes that were cast in the state of Georgia, Donald Trump won this state, period. Number two, get rid of those voting machines. Go back to paper ballots once and for all. Number three, get rid of those ridiculous drop boxes across this state that the Democrats use to stuff the ballots and steal our elections. Number four, let's go to national forensic audits in every election cycle across this country. As a matter of fact, it's one of the first bills I'll introduce when I get to Washington. You see, Georgians are sick and tired of weak-kneed, spineless politicians who won't fight for Trump, get to the bottom of 2020, and fix our elections. Well, if they won't do it, Mike Collins will. Send me to Washington. I'll fix this election. I'll get to the bottom of 2020, and I will fight for Trump's America First agenda.
And this is Donald Trump in August of 2016.
Hillary wants to essentially abolish the Second Amendment. By the way, and if she gets to pick her judges, nothing you can do, folks. Although the Second Amendment people, maybe there is, I don't know. But
In an attempt to control the future, various factions are trying to control what we remember about the past.
And what we're aware of in the present as well.
Right.
I was pointing out this week, I tweeted a picture of Nashville, Tennessee, where there are young men, white men in khakis and face masks, full face masks, flying swastika flags in broad daylight. And it's legal to do that. This is a free speech country. You're also free to yell that you're fucking Nazis at them.
They know that, however. Yeah.
But they know that. And I just said, this is violence is never the answer. It's time to turn down the temp. And here's the Nazi flag, right? And someone replied to me and said, "Excuse," and this is an ally. "Excuse me for asking, but is that actually real?"
Yes. Yes, it's real.
And it's the same bullshit of link, please, or evidence, please, on social media when I've got a photograph there that is not retouched, and I gave the source of the photograph and everything. But tell me the source. So that my time is wasted.
Right.
Assuring you of the facts of what I'm saying.
Right.
The Nazis and the fascists are at the door. And I am so grateful, actually, that, by Monday morning, this story of the paper cut on Trump's ear. And it's it's horrible that this kid had access to the guns, but that's why the story disappeared so quickly.
Right.
Is, as our listener Kevin Holtzinger tweeted, guns are the spice, right? Yeah. Trump can be replaced. What is he, the Hatterack?
Trump is the Kwisatz Haderach of hate.
Right.
But guns are the spice.
Guns are the spice, and the guns must flow.
The guns must flow. The Kwisatz Haderach, can come and go. There's always a backup. There's always another one. There's always another one in the breeding program. But the spice must always flow.
Yeah. And the spice is dark money and guns. And the threat of violence. Those are the spice. And so the fact that this was threatened to become a conversation about access to AR-15s.
Don't want to have that.
Made that story go away.
That dropped right off the radar. And you know what? We haven't heard a word from the medical doctors who attended Donald Trump.
What the hell? After hearing how many stories from Peter Baker about, Parkinson's experts entering the White House when Biden wasn't at home
and
wasn't even in the country.
Possible theoretical discussions among anonymous sources who opining about what they saw happening on a videotape. It reminds me, honestly, of who was it? It was Bill Frist.
Oh, diagnosing, right?
Remote diagnosis of Terry Schiavo. This is the reverse of that. Well, I'm not in the room and I'm not a doctor, but here's what I know to be true. All of these idiots with their fake, internet medical degrees get all the time they want in the spotlight. But we didn't hear.
But when it comes down to treating a presidential candidate for a gunshot wound, allegedly,
or a glass splinter,
or tested for syphilis.
Did they ask him if he knew who the president was or what year it was? Did they give him a cognitive test? Are you in shock? Do you have drugs in your system? Is there anything we need to know before treating you? I think the country deserves answers to those questions, and I don't think we're ever going to get them because it's not Joe Biden we're talking about.
It's not Joe Biden cover-up that we're talking about. Exclamation point, Peter Baker. Yep. Today, Anand Giridharadas interviewed Max Boot on his Inc. site, which has a paywall, about his upcoming book, Driftglass. Journalist and historian Max Boot's forthcoming critical biography of Ronald Reagan. How exactly did Morning in America lead to the American carnage of Trumpism?
How indeed.
Don't you dare call it Trumpism. That's an article by your wife, Driftglass. Let's mention that I'm his wife, okay? Full disclosure.
People need to know that, Blue Gal.
People need to know. I need to add that to my bio. All right. Then don't you dare call it Trumpism, which I wrote in the summer of 2016, before the election day 2016, that you shouldn't call it Trumpism. It's not Trumpism. It's the Republican Party.
Yeah.
So that's your first mistake. But Reagan, his life and legend, comes out this fall, begins to get at the answers to those questions by reassessing the conservative icon from the perspective of this very different era, unquote.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. I mean, I'm glad it's there. I'm glad he did it. But it really is another example of a lifelong Republican who got run out of or tossed out of or frightened out of or spit out of the Republican Party, who has their come to Jesus moment.
Yep.
And now has spent however long he's spent writing
years,
a book about
apparently
years about the real Reagan and the real Republican Party. Now it can be revealed, Blue Gal. Now it can be told what the real deal was. Except for the 2-volume history that Rick Perlstein wrote, 5 years ago.
Well, it's funny you should mention Rick Perlstein, Driftglass, because at almost the exact same moment, Joe Conason has a book that's out this past week, about exactly the same subject. And the two things that Driftglass found notable about it are what?
Well, I'm glad he wrote it, but it's where did he get this idea from in 2024 to write a book about conservatism? And who was interviewing him about the new book? Now, I want to make sure you understand, I'm not a book critic in this particular case. I have criticized other books. I think it's a great thing that Joe Conason has written a book about conservatism. But I was listening to this interview, and I'm going to quote him now and then make the punchline later. But, quote, remember, this is in 2024. Quote, this book began when my wife, Elizabeth Wagley, read an article in a little magazine called The Baffler by a historian named Rick Perlstein, who we know very well. Rick is the author of a sort of definitive history of the Goldwater campaign before the storm. And in 2012, he wrote an article for The Baffler dissecting the Romney campaign and the deceptions of the Romney campaign. But then he went a bit deeper and found that having subscribed to a bunch of conservative publications online, he was suddenly finding his inbox inundated with attempts to sell him things that were not worth anything. And by that, he means like gold bars and supplements and survival food and all that bullshit that conservatives buy up by the job lot, and they're basically worthless. Back to the quote. And then he realized that
excuse me, Driftglass. In addition to all that, books by Mark Levin.
Yes, which make excellent kindling, I understand. And he realized that this was now a phenomenon that was identical with a lot of American conservatism, like My Pillow and Alex Jones and all the rest of them. This is now more than 10 years ago. So my wife said, you know what? There's a lot more to this. And of course, it's gotten worse since. So then I read Rick's piece and I was like, yeah, this could be a book. And now it is.
This could be a book by Rick Perlstein.
And was.
In
fact, this was several books by Rick Perlstein.
Yes,
again, there are 40. I remember we live in Springfield. There are 48,000 books about Lincoln. That's
Absolutely.
a good thing. That's wonderful.
Yeah, fine. I get it.
What is fascinating about this is that he comes to the conclusion that we should really write a book about the history of conservatism. And I listened to the interview, and he goes through, the people around Goldwater were nuts. And then there's Jerry Falwell and Pat Robertson and Paul Weyrich. And then there's Lee Atwater. And there's the Tea Party, the fake Tea Party. And he's playing the hits.
Yeah.
And I'm listening to this going, wow, this is the this is the liberal blogosphere. Yes. This is just what liberals have been writing about. This is our mother tongue. This is what we talk about every day and have been talking about every day for 20 or 25 or more fucking years. This is what we knew about during the Clinton administration. But there was no such thing as the blogosphere, so we had no means to publish it. And here he's checking all the boxes, things that all liberals know. And these are the stories we tell our kids. Once upon a time, there was a man named Lee Atwater who was very, very bad. So we all know this stuff. The thing that really made me like dizzy and vertiginous was that he was being interviewed by Rick Wilson. And
you
Rick
didn't
Wilson,
tell me that in our rehearsal.
And Rick Wilson was acting like this is all new information. Tell me more about this Jerry Falwell fellow. And interspersed in there are, well, I knew this guy when I was a former member of my party. When I was I'm a former Republican. And back in my old life as a Republican, I knew so and so. And let me tell you a story about Ralph Reed, man. He was a con man. So it's part.
Oh
Yes,
my
I was
God.
adjacent to all of this, and I knew these people, but he's reacting as if this is all just brand new, marvelous information being revealed to him for the first time. That
Oh my
is controlling the
God.
past by controlling the present.
Yep.
That is saying, you all know deep in your hearts that I was the asshole here, that I was the cancer. I was the asshole who put the Max Cleveland lab.
I had the cooler with the stars and bars on my boat.
And you all but we're all, for the sake of friendship and allyship, we're all going to let me pretend that this is all kind of new. And this is a trick Charlie Sykes used to pull all the time on the Bulwark. It was he'd react in wonder when people started talking about what was going on in 2010. Now, again, these people all have a photographic memory of Robert Bork,
Yes,
and
right.
they all have a photographic memory of the 1964 civil rights movement and the way that the Democrats were back, 50 years ago. But somehow they don't have a really good memory of all the stuff they were up to, during their own lifetimes. Yeah. So that's what I mean, broadly speaking, of trying to control the present, control the past by controlling the present. If you control the narrative, then you can get away with pretending that none of the shit that happened over the last 8 years or 10 years ever really happened, because it's rude to say such things because Donald Trump got nicked on his ear by a bullet. And therefore, we should not talk about these things and we should just pretend they didn't happen. Or you can flip that over and say, here's a brand new thing we just discovered. The conservative movement has actually been going down this road towards fascism for 60 years. Who knew? Well, you know who knew? Liberals knew. And you know who was made pariahs by that knowledge, by their willingness to speak openly and talk honestly about that knowledge? Liberals were. So I'm dying to know, in which paragraph in Max Boot's book does it say, and you know what? The left was right all along.
Yep.
So if any of you buy it and look it over, again, I don't begrudge them. That's a great thing that there's more history out there. More history is always better. But the idea that they're reciting this stuff that we all know to be true as if it's freshly discovered, as if they just discovered adamantium and they're sharing it with the world, just makes me a little bit crazy. Anyway.
Driftglass, does the Republican National Convention appear puny to you this year? It just seems really, the whole room seems small, like they filled it with these big camera panels and, but like, it just seems like a tiny little thing.
Tiny, floppy, impotent thing is really what it seems like.
That's
like
what
they
I'm
can't get it up.
thinking.
They really can't get it up.
It's really small. Yeah.
Well, that's why you would want to invite a porn star to talk to the group. So.
Exactly. Barry Goldwater, Pinwheel Goldwater is spinning in his grave, and he deserves to spin in his grave. Couple more items of note. Keith Olbermann had a worst persons this morning that was 30 people long or so.
Yeah, it was long.
And that OnlyFans account holder, internet porn star, addressed the Republican National Convention, so they got that going for him. Also this week, Democratic National Committee Chairman Jamie Harrison educated a certain man named Nate Silver on Twitter. Nate, this was about the Ohio ballot deal, where Ohio Republicans tried to cut the deadline so that the deadline to be on the ballot was for the November election was before the Democratic National Convention. So the Democrats went ahead and had a nomination meeting to nominate Joe Biden so that he would be the nominee and they could put him on the ballot in Ohio.
Right.
And Nate Silver was apparently incensed about this. And so Jamie Harrison said, Nate, you can call me a lot of things, but a liar is definitely not one of them. I know you think you know everything, but class is now truly in session. Pull up a chair. The DNC started this process in May in response to the Ohio Secretary of State stating that our convention was after their deadline and no waiver would be provided. The current law in Ohio requires certification by August 7th to ensure a presidential candidate is on the ballot for November. Governor DeWine of Ohio, who is a Republican, signed into law on June 2nd a bill delaying the deadline until September 6th. Under the Ohio Constitution, that new law doesn't take effect until 90 days after enactment, which is September 1st. Therefore, The August 7th deadline will still be in place, giving rise to litigation and or GOP games to create more hurdles and roadblocks, because that's how they operate.
It would never. The people who staged the Brooks Brothers riot to put Bush in office
would never sue the Democratic Party to keep them off the ballot in Ohio.
The people who attacked the Capitol on January 6th would never consider doing something underhanded. No.
Welcome fake electors. It's the signs up in Milwaukee stores. That's so hilarious. Welcome future fake electors. All right. Getting back to Jamie Harrison. To not have a presidential... Oh, excuse me. So if we did nothing, then from August 7th until September 6th, we would not be in compliance with the Ohio law. And you know that the DNC has lawyers, election lawyers working for them. When you hear not in compliance with the Ohio law, Jamie Harrison didn't pull that out of his butt. He has a lawyer that he pays a lot of money to tell him that. We have to, and the whole point, this was the point with the Obama campaign in Iowa. Mm-hmm. They read the rule book and followed it. Mm-hmm. You have to, because the Republicans will sue you if you don't. To not have a presidential candidate on a state ballot would have enormous consequences and impacts on turnout for all races on the ballot. Mm-hmm. So you can definitely take that risk and other chances when you chair a party. I, however, will not.
Yeah. And this was sort of a broadside against all the bedwetters, some of whom work for an outfit called Pod Save something or other. I forget
something like that. I think a lot of their listeners are coming over to our podcast, I believe.
This will just cause people to think that the DNC is even more rigged against anybody who's wants to challenge Biden.
Because they're undoing the rigging of the Ohio Republican Party to keep Biden off the ballot in their state.
Well, it's easier to say that than to go through, the 4 paragraphs required
that Jamie Harrison did. Yeah.
To explain the rules and, policy, because policy is so boring.
Policy so boring.
So boring. Well, The law is so boring. It would bore you to sleep if you were to listen to it. Hey, speaking of sleepy, this is Chris Cillizza commenting on the very obviously sleepy Donald Trump, unable to keep his eyes open at his own convention. Quote, "This is so dumb. He was praying. I watched it live. There's so many legit hits on Trump. Why waste time on dumb conspiracy theories?" Unquote.
And did Chris Cillizza give any legit hits on Trump then?
No. I did. Well, as you know, Blue Gal, I have stopped following Chris Cillizza's career. Yeah. Because I wish he would just go away. And every now and then, like one of the many, 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 like Chuck Todd, one of the unflushable turds of the media, they bob to the surface, and suddenly they're back in your face. And you wonder, how did this guy ever get paid an assload of money by CNN? Oh, that's right. It's CNN. Never mind. I don't need to ask that question.
All right, folks. Driftglass is taking me out to dinner tonight after I'm done editing this show. He said, no edit, no dinner.
no edit, no food, Blue Gal. Mm-hmm.
Not true. Keep those cards and letters coming. We love hearing from you. Be aware that if you write to us at any of our addresses, we reserve the right to read your email or U.S. Postal Service. Go Postal Unions. Letter on the air unless you say otherwise. And I will be doing postcards to voters tomorrow night with my local Moms Demand Action group.
Yes, you
excited about that.
Another thing not to forget as we're talking about memory, don't forget our gourmet coffee guidelines. If you can afford to buy an espresso-based beverage for yourself, buy one for us. This is not charity. This is our job. Oh, and by the way, shout out to all of our Chicago people for surviving the derecho that blew through there last night.
Wow.
Believe me, a year ago, 2 weeks ago, we went through our own and we know how that is. So hope you're all hanging in there doing well.
Really got hit. In Joliet, they really got hit. Yeah.
So we are there with you in spirit. This is not charity. This is our job. And if you can spare $5 a month, please spare $5 a month at patreon.com/ProLeftPod. Please share our show on social media. And if you love this podcast, please get someone else to listen. And thank you so much for doing that.
Hey, Driftglass, how are the Internet Kitties doing this week? Oh, excuse me, this evening. This evening, how are the Internet Kitties doing?
Well, look, the Internet Kitties, no surprise, want to wish you the very happiest of birthdays.
Oh, thank you, Driftglass.
I love you, babe.
I love you too.
Let's think about living. Think about living. Let's think about loving. Think about loving. Let's think about the hooping and the hopping and the popping and the lovey-dovey. Let's forget about the wine and the crying, the shooting and the dying and the flying.
Professional Left podcast is recorded under a Creative Commons license. Copyright 2024-25, GGBG Productions.